Hey everybody, Evan here at Moviesauce with another gear review. Today's review, I'm actually going to record a couple of them because I'm not just testing or talking about stuff for you guys, I'm also just testing a bunch of new stuff for myself. This video in particular is going to be about 32-bit sound and in particular the Tentacle Sync devices, which are really cool. You'll see I've got two lavs on right now. These are both clipped to Tentacle Sync lav recorders, and they are recording, or they're synchronized to the Tentacle Sync boxes on my two cameras. So I've got the red Komodo with the wide lens here and the red Helium on the close-up. So there's 4 different Tentacle Sync devices, and they're all being synchronized through the Tentacle Sync app on the iPad that I'm also running a teleprompter on, which I haven't started using yet. I'm a little afraid it's going to be really obvious. And then I've also synced the sound, just to say up front, to my Zoom F6 recorder, which is attached to this boom mic right here. And the Zoom F6 also records in 32-bit. So I've got 3 sources of sound, 2 cameras. 2 cameras are recording in raw video, and 3 sources of sound are recording in raw audio, which makes this a very fun test. So let's get started. All right, I'm gonna push play on my teleprompter. We're gonna see how this goes. So sound recording technology generally hasn't evolved as fast as camera technology has. There's new cameras every year, new resolutions, all that jazz. Sound's been pretty consistent. As an example, my favorite microphone is this guy right here, which you can't even see in the wide shot. It's a Sennheiser MKH60. I bought this guy used about 14 years ago, 2007, and it was used then. So it's just a great sounding mic, and a good mic doesn't age very fast. But over the last couple of years, things have gotten really interesting with the introduction of 32-bit recording and smaller, more versatile lavs. So throughout my sort of experience, I've mostly stuck to on-camera mics and booms as much as I can. A well-placed boom mic is always the best option. It's just not usually as isolated, and often it's hard to get it where it needs to be for the perfect sound in a variety of different situations. So I've dabbled in lavs before. So I used the Rode Filmmaker Kit lavs for a while, and I have some actually over here. Hold on. I'm not prepared. So these are the Rode Filmmaker Kit lavs. The transmitter and receiver. So I bought a couple sets of these in 2016. We used them notably on our film Clowns and Robbers. What's nice about them is, and all the Wi-Fi lavs now, is that they automatically detect a open frequency on a Wi-Fi channel and connect there. So you don't have to like manually type in different radio frequencies and stuff and get them all synced. And then they also run on AA batteries, which is nice because those are way more readily available than 9 volts usually are, which is what traditional lav transmitters have always run on 9 volts, and it's kind of hard in a pinch to always have some good 9 volts around. Now clearly the downside with these are that they're very chunky. They're big, they're about twice as big as the normal lav box. Just for comparison, we'll get into in a minute, but this is my new Tentacle Sync one. Granted, this one's not transmitting anything, it's a recorder, but it's about the size of where things are now. These are chunky, we used them for a while, but you know, occasionally it can be hard to hide this on your talent's body somewhere if you're filming a narrative piece and you really need to hide it. So it did become a problem a little bit, but they were still pretty reliable, they sounded good, and they were easy to use, which is number 1 for me. Then I think about 2 years ago, I got these Sennheiser XSW, is that what they're both called? Yep, lavs. I got 2 sets of them. So this is the transmitter and the receiver. They use the same technology basically as the Rhodes, that's Wi-Fi based. They're very simple, all they have is a single on button. Hold it down, they power up. They're rechargeable over USB-C. And as you can see, it's about, They're shorter and thinner, probably about a third, maybe 25% even smaller than the Rode links, and virtually do the same thing. So these are a lot easier to hide. It's easy to toss it in a pocket. This is the transmitter, much easier to hide on your talent. And you can also much easier put the receivers on the camera if you're trying to record directly on camera. Altogether, just smaller is better. So these are great. The biggest issue I started having long term with them was we started to notice there's a line of sight limitation with that Wi-Fi technology. So the range wasn't great. We'd occasionally have dropouts depending on the blocking of a scene and, you know, if how far they are from the sound guy, kind of which way their body's facing depending on where the receiver is, if they, you know, walk behind a tree or something. We recently had a shoot on a roof and tried to have the sound guy on the ground and the people on the roof, and realized we were getting dropouts. And I thought it was just interference from the lavs, like rubbing on their clothes, because it sounds the same. Took us a minute to figure out if he just stood at the top of the ladder we were using to get on the roof. Suddenly it went away. So there is, you know, it's not as good of I guess not as versatile or reliable necessarily as the old-fashioned sort of radio lavs. And so now, a couple years later, continuing to watch technology evolve, it's led me to these Tentacle Sync lavs. Tentacle Sync's kind of a newer startup, and these products are pretty brand new, it seems. These lavs, and I know Rode and other companies have done similar, it's not a transmitter at all. It's just an internal recorder. It has a little SD card, and they ship with the SD card in there. It comes with one, a little 16 gig, which was great. When I got it, I opened it up to put a card in there, and there's already one in there. That's a really nice touch. But what you can see, actually these lights are even showing my levels on there. Test, 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 test. What's really cool about these, apart from being able to sync over Bluetooth with the Timecode in the app, is they also record in 32-bit. 32-bit's kind of the hot new thing in sound. So it records internally to an SD card in 32-bit and syncs over Bluetooth to timecode, which is kind of the two most important things about it. The downside is, you know, you can't really monitor it live. But since it's 32-bit, 32-bit sound is basically raw sound. So we've had raw video for a while on Red cameras, which lets you, you know, change ISO and color information and everything in post, just as you would in camera. It's not baked in. Raw audio is similar in that it doesn't really clip. It's possible, but it's really difficult to clip it. So as long as you're setting levels in a neutral zone, if somebody screams all of a sudden, it's not going to clip. There's nobody monitoring the boom right now, nobody controlling these lavs right now. So if I start talking like this all of a sudden, which would normally blow it out if I didn't adjust the lavs, the audio should be coming through clearly. And if I start to talk really quietly like this, I should be able to boost it and post pretty well without much trouble. So the idea here is kind of that in some ways it eliminates the need to constantly monitor sound or to potentially have a sound person there monitoring sound on set if you're a small crew. They can also start and stop recording remotely from the app. You can also do it from the switch on the side. They recharge over USB-C. They're supposed to have about I think they said like 8 or 9 hour battery. So that's a good day's shoot easily. The Sennheisers were only about a 5 or 6 hour battery. But for most of what we do, that was fine anyway. I don't think I've ever had a shoot where I've needed more than that or where any lavs have run out of power in the middle of it. I'm always conscious of it because I don't want that to happen. But it's never happened to me before, so we don't tend to do a lot of like 14-hour days and stuff like that. So the only issue is you're just not directly recording the sound on board with the camera. There's no way to do output to the camera to have it, you know, synced in your footage. But with Red cameras in particular, you don't really want to use the onboard recording that much if you can avoid it anyway, because it's just not as high quality. And then also if a lav comes loose or it's rubbing on clothes, you're not going to be able to identify that easily or in the moment. So it does sort of initiate a potential need to listen to playback. But I am for a lot of stuff I do, I'm trusting everything to kind of work out anyway. So this is just more peace of mind in that at least the levels now are pretty flexible. So the way these work is you have these boxes that are the recording lavs. These are separate. And then you have these little boxes you can buy for your camera. I forget the naming of all of them. These are called the Track E's. And I think those are called the Tentacle Syncs. I don't know. It's all the Tentacle stuff. You can look it up. I don't really care. And the way it works, they all give off a Bluetooth signal that syncs with your device. I've tried it both on my Android Google Pixel and my new iPad on iOS. Both work great. You can go in the app, you can name each device differently. So I've named the two boxes to be the names of the cameras. And then these are Lav 1 and Lav 2. A cool design feature is they come with these little colored rubber bands so you can differentiate them. You can change them out to different colors. So that's kind of a nice touch. And so using the app, you sync them all together. You hit a software button to sync. It syncs your camera and your lavs. You're good to go. You may have to change some settings in your camera based on what the default is. On the Helium, I've never used Timecode on any of my cameras. This is all new to me. On the Helium, it just worked plugged directly into the Timecode port on the camera. On the Komodo, I had to actually go to settings and change something. I don't remember. There's a Timecode setting where you can switch to external. And once I did that, it worked. And then the same was true on the Zoom. There's a Timecode setting in the menus. You go down to external and then continuous, because I only have 2 of the sync boxes, even though I've got 3 recording devices. And so what I did is I unplugged the one from the camera and plugged it into the Zoom F6 recorder to get it synced to jam the timecode. Why is it jam the timecode? It's a weird thing to say. And then I unplugged it so it's not continuously syncing. If there's any drift, that might be an issue. I'll find out when I get in post on this piece. But that works pretty well to save you the trouble getting another box. But I probably will at some point invest in a 3rd box for the Zoom. But it's pretty neat. I've tested it a little bit already. I'm going to test it more with this video. What really got me to start, wanting to use Timecode is we got 2 cameras now. We got an A camera and a B camera. Traditionally, I've been a 1-camera operation for like 9 years, or even more if you include my non-professional time. So, if you had a recorder with all the sources plugged into it, all your lavs and boom and everything, those are all going to be synced anyway based on the start stop of the recorder. So you drag those in, sync it to either a scratch track on the video, or you do it manually by just looking at the waveforms. I've done that forever. It's not the best solution necessarily, but it was simple enough because you're ultimately just syncing one thing. I've also just never really used clapboards, or as somebody that's usually directing, running camera, and editing. It's like I know the process. I'll figure it out in post. Usually you're shooting in sequence, or at least your audio files are in the same sequence as your video files. So it's usually not that big of a pain to go in and synchronize stuff, but it usually is the first, steps in editing anything, and it can take a lot of time. It was really getting the Komodo that started making it a real issue that I had to kind of address. So looking into the Tentacle Sync stuff, it seemed so, it solved more than one problem at once, so it kind of eased me into the Timecode stuff. And now it kind of feels like, I can't believe I wasn't using Timecode before. Probably a lot of people are going to be laughing at me about that. But it's also cool. It's a cool evolution of the technology because, I could also see these boxes are pretty small, and the idea that you're syncing over Bluetooth is kind of a no-brainer, and I could see this sort of almost being built into cameras, 5 or 10 years from now. It makes a lot of sense. I will say one thing that was a little funky to figure out is The cabling is a little different for each thing. The Tentacle sync boxes that are on the cameras come with a little cable, a little 3.5mm jack thing. That works fine on the F6, but both my Red cameras each have their own different kind of cable you have to use. The Helium cable, Tentacle sync makes one that works fine. I had to order that separate, and then the Komodo has another special cable if you're not using a breakout box that you have to use. So there's 2 different cables for the Red camera, and then a third different cable for the F6, which I'm guessing is kind of the main kind of sound sync cable. So that's a little funny, but I got it figured out pretty quickly. If you've never tried to do any kind of auto syncing in Premiere, which is what I use, you just drag all your stuff onto the timeline, select it all, right click. You can sync by waveform, or you can sync by timecode. And you click timecode, it automatically detects the timecode on the footage and the audio, pulls it right together. It's saves a lot of time. Timecode. And again, there will be situations where it's going to be important to monitor sound, and that's where I have the Zoom F6 for, which I just bought about 6 months ago. The reason I upgraded to that, just to kind of take a little detour, so I used to have the Zoom F8, which is a great giant 8-port field recorder, works great, sounds great. But one thing that I hated about it was the lack of rechargeable battery option, at least a cheap one. The F6 is smaller. You only sacrifice 2 ports and it's about half the size, and you can use Sony MPF batteries on it, which saves a lot of time. And the AA's are nice for a while until you're realizing you got to change them out, before every shoot, because you want to keep them, at the max capacity at the beginning of a shoot. You don't want to start with half run out batteries and change in the middle of the day. And it ran on 8 of them, so it really just ate through a lot of batteries. So the rechargeable battery makes a huge difference. And then the smaller size is nice. I can slap it on a belt clip and, do single operator stuff with it. But it also records in 32-bit as well. It was the first Zoom recorder, I think, that records in 32-bit. So that was my first time dabbling with 32-bit about 6 months ago when I bought that. I was plugging everything in, getting 32-bit everything, and then these came out, and it's like, now we don't even have to plug the lavs into that. But when we want to use the boom, or I want to be able to monitor lavs, and I might go back to the Sennheisers when I want to do that, we still do ultimately have the problem of, now I've got 4 boxes, little boxes that I have to recharge over USB-C, and I'm probably going to add a 5th for the recorder. And then the recorder runs on rechargeable batteries too. So there is this problem of the more stuff, the more batteries you have to worry about and recharge. But I don't think that's going away anytime soon. Sound has always been one of the sort of least sexy and hard to master elements of filmmaking. New technology is making it a lot easier to manage. Any small team or single owner operator should really get on the 32-bit bandwagon as soon as possible. And if you're not recording off camera, you probably should be. A lot of people try to figure out how to record on camera on the Reds, and it just, in addition to adding gunk onto the camera itself, it's just not as high quality as when you record off camera. The Tentacle sync gear, it's really priced competitively. I think the set of each of these lavs, individual lav recorders, it comes with the mic and the clip and everything, is $350. And the set of 2 of those boxes, I think, was around the same. I might be wrong. That might seem like a lot at first, depending on where you are in expectations, but when you compare it to cameras and lenses and stuff, it's worth investing in good sound. It's easy to overlook and want to invest everything in camera stuff, but sound's just as important. It's not something you want to be cheap about. So I highly recommend the Tentacle sync stuff. I'm kind of excited to see what else they come out with in the future. Not that I'm missing anything, but they seem like a cool company doing cool products. I bought these, they didn't send them to me. I've not been in any contact with the company. But I've been seeing a lot of people in sort of the Red groups on Facebook recommending these. I decided to bite the bullet when I first saw them, and I've been really happy with them. But also this whole video, this whole review, it's just as much a review as it is an opportunity for me to kind of test them all out too, because I'm still pretty new with them. I've not actually used these on a professional shoot yet, so take that with a grain of salt. Yeah, they're small, they're effective, they sound good, or you can judge if they sound good. This is number 1 and No, this is number 1. This is number 2. I'm all tangled up. Purple's number 2. This is number 1, and this is number 2. That's not how you use lav mics. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any questions in the comments, comment, and I'll try my best to answer it. Hopefully the teleprompter wasn't too weird, but I'm pretty sure I've been going off of it for most of this. But just one more thing to test. I guess it is worth noting that increasingly all my film stuff is sort of has app capabilities. I just bought an iPad, even though I'm more of an Android guy, just as a dedicated work device, you know, for syncing labs, for using for wireless control on the red Komodo, for using for drone, for using for gimbal. I can control lights with it. We kind of gotten to the point where you sort of actually need a separate device to manage all that stuff on a set. That's not just your phone. So I would also recommend buying an iPad, I guess. But then it means somebody's got to be in charge of running that too. I'm also using it, obviously, as I've said, as a teleprompter. So there's lots of uses for it. But you know, how many things you can juggle at once with it is kind of tricky too. Also, if you're curious, I'm shooting with my new DZO film Pictor zooms in this video. This obviously is the wide angle 20 to 50 millimeter on the red Komodo down here, filming in 6K. And this is the 50 to 125 millimeter on the Helium, filming in 8K. And I will talk about those in the next video.